talking financially. And then once that conversation is had, at that point, you can go further and you can take it a step further and go, hey, where else do we have an opportunity? And for Virginia, that's the benefit to where they are right now. And the ultimate asset is that they're in a spot where they can hit the reset button on all this, because it's not the values of Tony Bennett that you wanted to say, hey, we're moving on from. Because Virginia announcing today, Ron Sanchez not being retained Virginia Cavalier men's basketball coach. It's the other parts, and let's be real here, it is the structure around the program. And if the people in charge of the Virginia Cavalier men's basketball program, if they want to support and bankroll someone else, you're kind of at the mercy of that right now. Like, it's not necessarily fair. If Tony Bennett asked for more money and wanted to run the program that way, they would clearly have done that for him. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. I know, Trey, breaking news when it comes to that. But when you're looking at the Virginia Cavaliers, there are a number of times where you can go back into this season and realize that Ron Sanchez was getting his young Jeezy on.
I ain't see played the hand I was dealt.
And he was playing the hand he was dealt. Christian Bliss, point guard, was injured for much of the year. And to Sanchez's credit, I don't blame him in early January for saying, yeah, he's been medically clear, but it's basically a comfort decision and he doesn't want to play. I mean, what's it going to do? Impact his future as the head coach? It really had nothing to do with him impacting his future as the head coach, nor would it have. But you factor that in, Jalen Worley, who was being groomed, even though he's 6'7" and more of a wing from FSU, he was being groomed to be the point guard. And he's the one player who transferred out when Tony Bennett left. So you're left with Day-Day Ames. Andrew Rohde, who's more of a complimentary backup guard, was asked to play as a starter. There are all of these things that you factor in, and that ultimately drove this decision to where it landed today.
And you're offensively, you were very much dictated by how good did Isaac McNeely play. I mean, I think there was a stat like he had 13, 20-point games. Like, this offense was stale, and it went as far as if Isaac McNeely had a good game, Virginia offensively looked pretty decent. And I think we knew this was coming. And Virginia fans, don't fret. Friday, 11:30, USA Network. Your possible next coach is playing in his first game of the A10 tournament as TBD takes on VCU.
Yes, it would. And it took there is 100% the factor that that's the case. Jerry Ratcliffe brought it up Monday in covering the Commonwealth, Fast Lane, Ed Lane, where you listen to podcasts to hear his thoughts. That was the direction that Virginia was probably going to go. And we'll get to Liberty in the Conference USA women's tournament. They won handily today. And the men's tournament, they'll play tonight. Richie Longshots, 5:30.
There was a great preview this morning of really both from Bryson Gordon.
I was about to say with Bryson Gordon. But there's the other part to this, and this is the whole, you're not cleansing yourself of the Tony Bennett values if you're Virginia. You want to incorporate those values while still having a pay for play, and the reality that, yes, money is going to be a factor. And I think this is a clear delineation. For as much as Liberty has financially, including revenue sharing coming up in NIL with resources, I mean, look, I've said it before, I can see Tony Bennett being an assistant at Liberty, an advisor at Liberty. I just don't think he wants to be involved in Power 5, I'm including the Big East here, basketball, because that's a different game. And the style in which they play, if anything, this is a testament to what Richie McKay has done at Liberty, because listen to Ron Sanchez. This was a couple of weeks ago, but he mentioned this about the pack line defense and how challenging it is on the initial get-go.
Trying to accomplish, and then there's how do you do that? There are a lot of nuances to it with positioning and stance and closeouts. Some of our guys have had a difficult time closing out and, fouling three-point shooters. And, I think at times some of those have been questionable, but there are a lot of little things I think you need to improve. You need to understand there's a level of anticipation that comes with it that you only get through rehearsal, unless you're just instinctively like an Isaiah Wilkins, Ryan Dunn, just anticipatory player. Some guys, are kind of reactive, and the only way you get there is through habits, to teaching, to drilling. And it just doesn't happen overnight. But guys are getting better, they are improving. And I think that's the biggest challenge of the pack.
That's the biggest thing, is the challenge with the pack line and how challenging it takes. You heard that a number of times from that bite we played from Ron Sanchez. Anticipatory. It takes time. You're not allowed that in this day and age. Like, as much as the Tony Bennett system, and look, I love it. I love what he did at Virginia. I think if you had structure and guardrails and contracts in place and you knew players would be there for multiple years, it would work. And I don't buy the idea that you could not sell that because...
Which that could happen in the next 2 years.
And if and when that does, a Ron Sanchez is more appealing. A Tony Bennett's more appealing in particular because, Sanchez and Bennett is kind of like, Jonathan Gannon and Vic Fangio in the sense of like, if you're going to get the Fangio tree, you want Fangio teaching it.
Yeah, I was going to say Bennett, yes. I just think Bennett wasn't willing to adjust or...
Oh, he admitted he wasn't. He admitted that's why he left.
I think more of Ron Sanchez was... This is a bad comparison, admittedly, but it's the one I can think of. Actually, you know what? I got it. It's like if Alabama hired Tommy Rees as their head coach after Nick Saban, like a guy who wasn't there that long. I know Ron Sanchez was there longer than Tommy Rees. Rees was there for like 1 year, but like an sort of unproven. I know Sanchez had a little bit more head coaching experience than Tommy Rees, who had none. Maybe it would... I was going to say if they hired Bud Foster at Virginia Tech but Foster was two more tied. Like that might be the best example. It's if Virginia Tech hired Bud Foster right after they had Frank Beamer. It's like you're basically just trying to buy the guy who the copycat of the guy.
Yeah, I mean,
as best you can, and it's never going to be that version.
You're buying the cheaper version, if you will.
You're buying the Dollar Tree version. No offense to Ron, that sounds bad, but
I
think Ron Sanchez. So here's the thing: like if Ron Sanchez goes and becomes a power, like a mid-major coach, like I don't think this will happen because, like, what if, for example, essentially Ryan Odom and Ron Sanchez switch spots? I think Ron Sanchez could have a lot of success at VCU. And I think eventually, unless you're, a guy like John Shire, who I just think is an elite coach, he's proven that now and has elite resources at Duke, right away, you're not going to be successful if you're this assistant being the guy. It never works to be the guy after the guy outside of John Shire. And guess what John Shire had? This year he had Cooper Flagg. He had the best player in the country. Like he gets the best player in the country. You can be the guy after the guy, but in 95% of cases, it's never good to hire the guy after the guy, or it just never works out. Just
9 times out of 10, you're on the wrong end of being the guy after the guy.
And now I think for Virginia, it's also just you needed a clean slate because I think if you hired it's like a really good example of this is USC in the 2000s had its max success. They won national championships. This is in football. And what do they do for the longest time? They just try to hire a Pete Carroll guy. And I know Lincoln Riley hasn't had the most success, but whether it was a Lincoln, I almost said Lincoln Riley, a Lane Kiffin, or even worse, Clay Helton. Like they try to hire a guy connected to Pete Carroll, and it just never worked. If you keep hiring guys connected to Tony Bennett, it's just not going to work because you're going to have Tony Bennett expectations with a guy who's not Tony Bennett. And no offense to a lot of people, Tony Bennett doesn't grow on trees.
No, look, this is all the more of what Tony Bennett did being so impressive during his tenure. And with the news coming down at 5:00 this afternoon, and a carefully orchestrated, but obviously planned ahead of the ACC tournament release from UVA, that Ron Sanchez is not being retained as the men's basketball coach, which I think the way the season ended and now looking at it in its totality, I know we debated a couple of weeks ago, hey, you have to consider the guy. That doesn't mean you have to hire him. And you've got the full body of information. And I think we saw that in Syracuse. And maybe the final nail in the coffin, so to speak.
Georgia Tech.
Syracuse.
Regular season finale
yes.
at Georgia Tech.
Because today's outcome had no bearing on that. I mean, if they didn't, unless they won the whole thing, you're not keeping Sanchez around. And even then, I don't think it's the guy you want.
We just saw a school overreact to a late season run, and you can't fire a guy after making the Final Four. But you get my point with Kevin Keats.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they wanted to obviously fire him.
Maybe just not give him the extension after he makes the Final Four.
Correct. Well, I mean, but I think it was written in his contract. And then again, I'm of the belief if you're in, we'll get to that in the Fast Five at 5-ish because there are more thoughts on that. But to wrap this up, and we'll get to the Liberty stuff. We're going to hold off on Liberty men in Conference USA tournament action tonight.
We had to change things up
because they go on the air. Well, 6:30 p.m. tip from Huntsville, but the news breaking of Ron Sanchez not being retained at Virginia has changed things for us today. So we'll touch on that with Richie Longshots. There are plenty of angles to cover.
And I have a question for you. I know this is not about Virginia. It's about Virginia Tech.
Yes.
Have you seen the quote of, I think, the college basketball season by Toby Lawal?
Oh, it's great. It's phenomenal. I'll paraphrase it here. We were kind of booty this year.
No, you can say, I think you can say that word on the radio.
This year, but we were not as bad of as people.
I have the whole thing if you want it.
Can we get to that in the Fast Five at 5-ish?
Yes, I can. I'm ready.
I will tee you up when that time comes. But we will ask you to kind of beep it out because we try to be family friendly here. Since a lot of times people are driving.
I'll say as.
Ours.
Or booty.
As, booty, any of those.
Buttocks.
Yeah, we got. Hey, by the way, yes, I'm about to do this.
Time to take a detour in the fast lane.
I got to read to my kid's class today. The one who is my son, who, by the way, shares a desk with our fearless leader, Gary's granddaughter. And they are the two that get into the most discussions in class.
Are they boyfriend, girlfriend?
We think they might be for kindergarten, relatively speaking.
Okay.
There are books, I did not read this one today, about butts and different names to call and different uses for the booty. Obviously, this is written for kids, so we're not talking about Uncle Luke variety, but it's out there. So anyway, to the point of this with Ron Sanchez being retained or not being retained as the men's basketball coach at Virginia, I think you had to make this move because the principles for Ron Sanchez and his skill set as a coach are what he's able to do with the pack line defense, which, unless you are adapting on the fly, and again, credit to Liberty's Richie McKay because he's done it with transfers this year and deserves even more credit. And again, it's more mind-boggling how he was not Conference USA Coach of the Year.
But he also has a good mix. Like, it's not just transfers. It's a good mix of returning players.
Correct. And they found the right medium. But,
which is what you'll need.
Which is what you'll need. But to have the pack line defense, you need that structure. And Liberty doesn't have as much money overall that they can pay, and they don't have the prestigious conference that UVA does. But I think you could argue before the start of this year, and I would say, as we know it right now, I think this will change. Liberty is better structured from an NIL revenue sharing alignment from the athletic department and the collective and everybody else than the Virginia Cavaliers were.
I think a good way to phrase this is I don't think the pack line defense necessarily can't be successful in college basketball in this era because it's a style of defense. Like, you can learn it. It's that Ron Sanchez, as we said at the start of the season, got an impossible hand. He basically had to, in his first big, this isn't Charlotte, this is Virginia. He basically had Tony Bennett expectations, especially when I think there was some fan apathy over the last couple of years with Tony Bennett as they were declining. So it's like you have basically the frustration of fans with the decline of Virginia basketball the last years without the cachet of being Tony Bennett, and you basically had to make this team a tournament team, and that was going to be impossible.
Yeah, you're right.
It's nothing to do with the pack line defense. It was literally, if you probably gave Ron Sanchez true serum, he's like, I have one path to keep this job, and it's make the NCAA tournament, and I don't know if we're going to do that. And I bet you he probably felt like it was an uphill battle to start with, and I think he did as well. Probably could have done a little bit better, but he was learning on the fly. And he probably knew about it, 8 days before the season? So credit to him for the one credit I will give for him, and the reason why I think he can be a good basketball coach is this team didn't quit. They played hard. Even in the game today, they fought to the very end of this basketball game. They didn't quit on him. And that, to me, I thought of this football example. I know we're going long. Luke Fickell was the interim coach when Jim Tressel got fired because of the tattoo thing, which is still crazy.
By the way, he is the list of coaches that now would not be fired for the things they were fired for.
Yes, he went 6-6 at Ohio State. That's going 0-11 everywhere else, and he got fired or he didn't get retained. They replaced him with Urban Meyer. So good, maybe Virginia fans, you get replaced with another great coach. But my point being, Luke Fickell proved he's a really good really good football coach. He went to Cincinnati and was the first Group of 5 team to make a playoff. He had 8 NFL draft picks. he's been underperforming in Wisconsin, but still, he proved he was a good football coach. I think Ron Sanchez can still prove he's a good basketball coach because this team hasn't quit on him. And I have high hopes for him.
Normally, when you fail a second time, you don't get another chance. I don't think this one should be dinged against Ron Sanchez. I would hire him.
This should be like
it's kind of
a Twilight Zone year.
To use a betting term, it's a free play.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of your evaluation of Sanchez, he did as well as he could. He got his young Jeezy on for most of the season.
I ain't cheat. Played the hand I was dealt.
And he really had this team fighting. It's not enough to keep your job. You got to win. I mean, this is the ACC we're talking about. But to give him a chance somewhere else, there's a reasonable opportunity. The pressure won't be the same, and you won't be compared where you don't have the financial resources and program alignment. I think Virginia's getting there, honestly. If football and women's basketball are indications, it's clear it looks like they are moving in the right direction, but they're not there just yet. And I mean, this is a good enough program, even with Tony Bennett, that you can attract a big name coach, whether it's a Ryan Odom from VCU, I think is probably the front runner. And I'd agree with what Jerry Ratcliffe has reported, the veteran UVA reporter.
Richard Pitino.
TJ Otzelberger, Richard Pitino, any of those guys would be guys that would be great fits. I love Richard Pitino. I honestly don't think he or Will Wade are coming to UVA, but it would be funny nonetheless.
Go get Rick. Go get Slick Rick, the Don.
He's perfect, by the way, for St. John's. Like, he really is for that job.
Which St. John's might be heading to San Antonio in my bracket when it comes out, depending on the matchups.
Well, I mean, we'll see all that. The entire NCAA tournament and the Big East tournament, semis and championship, all coming on your home for your home for March Madness, the VTR in Sports app. We've got 2 games tonight. Navy, I can't figure out how they're only a 3.5-point underdog to American in the Patriot League championship.
American coming off a win over birthday boy Tom Bull's alma mater in Colgate.
Yes, the toothpaste. So that's what we got from that. So anyway, to put a bow on the Virginia thing, the one thing about Virginia Tech and Virginia going 1-0 in the ACC tournament, it confirms what they knew for much of the year, as Kurt would say.
Well, I should have known.
We did. We knew what was going to happen. Nobody thought these teams were going to make deep runs in Charlotte. They did not.
Tech feels a little bit more screwed than Virginia.
Very justifiably with the theme of the tournament.
Shout out to Mike Barber. Best reaction was Mike Barber. I said it this morning.
It was. The theme of the tournament has been bad officiating, which leads us into...
It's time for Fast 5 at 5-ish. 5-ish minutes on 5 relevant topics done around 5 p.m.-ish. Ish, because our counting skills are kind of ish. Let's start with number 5.
Call me old school, but I'm not the type of guy that goes, oh, the officials cost somebody a game. I'm an Eagles fan. When they lost the Super Bowl 2 years ago to the Chiefs before exacting sweet revenge in New Orleans this year. But when they lost that Super Bowl and James Bradbury was called for the holding, I thought it was right to the letter of the law. It may have been cheap, but it didn't cost them the game. There are other things that could have happened, even if they're minute, that could have happened. But when bad officiating does pop up, it does cast a shadow over what could be a really good game. And we've seen this now multiple times in the ACC tournament. They call a foul late in the first half on Virginia against Georgia Tech. And I don't believe that's the reason Georgia Tech jumped out to an early
It tied
lead
the game
half.
at 25 and a half.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, first of all, that says enough that it was a 25-point game at halftime per team. So not good.
And it foul. Air quotes.
You're using air quotes for those that are not watching at Fastlane, Nedlane, or VTR in Sports on YouTube and Facebook Live. But you've got that. You have yesterday where questionable officiating against Virginia Tech in the double overtime game against Cal. Notre Dame, a phantom foul, gave them free throws at the end of regulation, and they sank the first one and got the victory over Pitt by 1, 55-54. Really? Like, that's what we've got in the ACC? The whole ACC thing from back in the day was hashtag go ACC. And then once the ACC dropped it, it became a mockery of, look how cool we are, and yet how behind we really are. Bad officiating on a grand stage, when you're already being upstaged by a bad year, is not a good look for the ACC. Meanwhile, what is a good look? The Liberty Flames, they cruised to a victory over Sam Houston State in the quarterfinals of the Conference USA Women's Basketball Tournament today. Yes, Sam Houston, they're not good this year. 13-16 is how their season ended, but credit the Lady Flames. 78-51, 27-point win, and they jumped on Sam Houston State early in this contest and never looked back. That's the testament to Kerry Green having this team ready from the get-go. They jumped out to an early 11-4 lead in this one. They were locked in from the beginning. And for Liberty, balanced scoring, you combine that with the early focus, gives them a real good win. And the best part about that for the Lady Flames is you're kind of comparing yourself to Middle Tennessee and what they do in the bottom half of the bracket. And we'll see how that unfolds over the course of the tournament. They're probably going to clash in the championship. But for Liberty to take care of business early means you don't have to expend yourself. There's kind of some energy budgeted for the Lady Flames. Speaking of budgeting,
Number 3.
we can question the Washington Commanders. Trey has done that often in the morning warm-up earlier this week. And look, I still think they and the LA Rams are the two teams, and if they could add a receiver, I'd put Green Bay in the mix as well, but teams that can make the jump to challenge Philadelphia in the NFC East. Or in the NFC
I agree with
playoff
that.
picture.
I'm just saying, buyers beware.
But well, and here's where I go. Jonathan Allen agreed to a 3-year, $60 million deal with Minnesota. They gave Javon Kinlaw a 3-year deal worth $45 million. So for $5 million a year less, you go from Jonathan Allen, who is able to play defensive tackle and defensive end, to
And a
Javon
Pro Bowl
Kinlaw,
caliber
and a
player.
Pro Bowl caliber player. I wouldn't go all pro. That's usually like the top 2 or 3 in the position, but Allen is a high-end player. For Javon Kinlaw, look, again, Eagles fan coming out here. If this was the Eagles making a move to shed $5 million a year in cash commitments, I would completely understand that because they're up against the cap and have big salaries to pay. But Washington's market-setting deal, the one that's going to matter the most, is not eligible for 2 more off seasons because Jaden Daniels will get the bag, and if Washington's smart, they'll lock him up in early 2027 because the longer you wait, ask the Dallas Cowboys.
Or the Cincinnati Bengals, who somehow are doing it worse.
Either one, you only end up having to pay more. So for Washington, you've got time with this. 2 of the 3 years for Jonathan Allen wouldn't even collide. Heck, really 3, because when you sign that early tender to a rookie, you got 2 extra years with the rookie option, plus the extension after that. So you're negotiating from a real position of strength, even with the market-setting deal. I don't get what Washington was doing with the $5 million per year downgrade from Jonathan Allen to Javon Kinlaw. Okay, Kinlaw has more explosiveness, but even in San Francisco, he was inconsistent, and those were his better years. I understand Adam Peters is familiar there, and maybe he knows the right buttons to push, and maybe the environment will be better in Washington, certainly than it was with the Jets. That's not saying anything, but in Washington. But I don't really like this particular move from the Commanders. Look, I still think they're a real challenger to Philadelphia. I overall get the aggressiveness they've had this offseason. Laramie Tunsil, Deebo Samuel going after question marks. But the thing that gets me with Jonathan Allen is you could have just kept Allen and Javon Kinlaw and had both of them and a much more stacked defensive line. That's the real head scratcher to me with the Commanders.
It feels like it's kind of what Houston did last year. They're banking on this I don't want to say unattainable, but this major jump from Jaden Daniels. And I think that, especially in the NFL, especially in a quarterback's second season, that is very hard to bank on despite how good he played, because 90% of the time, the quarterback, I don't see regresses, but they have the quote-unquote sophomore slump. And you're now doing players who are very boom or bust kind of players, like a Laramie Tunsil, who's injured and commits penalties, coming off a bad year, paying a lot of money to at 31 years old. And you have Javon Kinlaw, who hasn't proved anything yet. And it's just, I like the Wagner and Ertz move, bringing them back, bringing your leadership back. But again, those are 2 older players. Where's who are young players you're going to keep part of this core with Jaden Daniels?
Those are all very fair and reasonable questions.
And you're giving up draft picks where, if Philadelphia's proved anything, it's get as many draft picks as possible, get as many swings as possible.
Well, I mean, that's what they're doing right now. They're just going for the compensatory picks in the next couple of years, and they'll trade a year ahead. Hey, we'll give you a 3rd-round pick this year for a 2nd round next year, and a 2nd round the following year it'll be a 2nd rounder for a 1st rounder. And you're like, how'd they do that? Like, that's what they do.
Look what they did with the Carson Wentz trade. I think that's the greatest work by a GM in NFL history.
Meanwhile, on to the Washington Commanders. I will give them credit for this. If this is part of their strategy, this would make sense. Who would you prefer if you're the Washington Commanders? We put the poll out at
this was dumb
on Twitter and Instagram. Trey Hendrickson, defensive end Cincinnati, who has not been traded yet but is on the block, or wide receiver DK Metcalf, who has gone to Pittsburgh. More on them in a moment. To me, it's a no-brainer. Like,
it's Trey Hendrickson.
100%.
But
impact defensive linemen over wide receivers all day. It's position scarcity and value.
Oh, it's more of you've already traded for Deebo Samuel. Like if you didn't so I said this here. I said I'd rather have DK Metcalf. Like if you made the argument, would you rather have DK Metcalf or Deebo Samuel? I'd rather have DK Metcalf. He's younger. He plays like everything you want. Like Debo is injury prone. And DK Metcalf, checks knows, has not played running back in his career.
Oh, for sure.
But then when you go Trey Hignerson, also great first name, when he led the league in sacks last year, versus you're going to pay $50 million for a third wide receiver, you just can't do that.
We can come up with the all-trade team because there are enough of them in the NFL. I'd love to see that. That might be something.
My favorite thing is now that there's I think that could be a Friday hypothetical, but we could do well. The best is we have a 1,000-yard running back in our stable because there is a Tyrone Tracy in New York. He ran for 1,000 yards last year.
Yes, indeed. Meanwhile, speaking of DK Metcalf, DK Metcalf goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They already have George Pickens. Metcalf is rather mercurial. He does work hard. Hopefully, if you're a Steelers fan, he can show that
The standard is the standard.
as Mike Tomlin likes to preach. And if anybody can handle the high-maintenance wide receivers that are now in Pittsburgh, it would be fantastic. By the way, I love Antonio Brown reporting that Aaron Rodgers is going to Pittsburgh because when Antonio Brown speaks, we all should stop and pay attention
He
to
gets
that.
it right a couple of times. Hashtag CTESPN.
Hey, I will say this, though. Antonio Brown, I've seen his jersey worn in the last couple of years to Jersey night at high school football games. If you're a parent and that's your child, you might need to have a real conversation with him or her about what they're really doing wearing that jersey. But Aaron Rodgers will go to Pittsburgh. But he is taking his sweet time because here's a shocker.
No, Ed, we need him to go to Minnesota. Michael Massey needs it.
Very much so.
Sorry, that's it.
When has Aaron Rodgers not milked anything for what it's worth? I'm sure he's made up his mind. It's obvious Pittsburgh's the best option. Oh, let's go to the Raiders. They've already got a quarterback now. Let's go to the Giants. What could possibly go wrong? Or let's go to Pittsburgh with a really good coach who squeezed a lot out of a not so good roster last year, and they just added DK Metcalf. Wonder where he's going to go. But Mr. I love attention as much as my predecessor in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers, and I just can't get over myself. He's going to milk this for all it's worth. Meanwhile, when we come back in the fast lane,
wait, you didn't let me get the quote. You forgot the Toby Lawal quote.
You're right. Number one. Read it out, Trey.
So the question was, what are you proud to Toby Lawal? What are you proud of when reflecting on yourself and reflecting on your team? He said, my team, I'm proud of how far we came. What do they have us in the preseason? Maybe 14th or 15th? Then they thought we were going to be booty. I mean, we're still booty, but we weren't that bad. You know what I'm saying? We beat expectations. Hey, he's not wrong.
He's not. And look, he's got an optimistic take.
It makes me want NIL deal with dude wipes or sharp,
He's screaming NIL deal.
I think him, Jaden Young, and what's the other guy? The other freshman. I'm blanking on the name.
Rex Steiner?
Rex Steiner's a sophomore. The other who had cramps yesterday.
Ben Burnham.
No, that's a senior.
Sorry. I'm just throwing names out there because we got to get to our next guest. And
I know. If I can look at it.
Go, Trey. Go. You got this.
It is Mr. Ben Hammond.
Okay. Yeah. Ben Hammond.
I know it's a Ben. So I bet you those guys will get retained.
Speaking of Ben, somebody who's been on the fast lane before, I had no better segue than that.
That's a good one.
But Richie Longshots, if you want to make money, he's your guy for March Madness, and he's ours. He'll join us next.
We're here with Colt from We Fix Stupid Computers. Colt, to go along with your residential or individual walk-in services that you offer, you also do a lot of business IT support. How about you discuss that, and what specifically do you do to help businesses in the area?
We see a lot of that. Small to medium-sized businesses, they still have their IT projects. They still need resources to help them within their office and for remote users. And so we'll step in and fill in the gap where we do a lot of projects for them, help them manage their resources, their budgets, and get their technology under control.
Colt, how can these people reach out to you to assess their IT needs?
Call us. Our number is 434-525-8590. Our website, wefixstupidcomputers.com. We're on Facebook. And our office is here locally, 14690 Forest Road, right next to Scott's Cabinet on 221.
Mark Dalton here with Terry Subaru. Love to drive? Then you'll love the all-new 2025 Subaru Wilderness family. These cars are built for adventure with symmetrical all-wheel drive, rugged capability, and legendary Subaru reliability. These stylish vehicles are ready for anything. Plus, every new Subaru we sell comes with an exclusive Terry Promise, a lifetime powertrain warranty. Visit us on Forest Road in Lynchburg or browse our inventory online 24/7 at terrysubaru.com. Terry Subaru. You'll love our cars.
Do you have a sports card and memorabilia collection?
Wow.
Did you inherit one? Not sure what to do with it? BNC Sports has been your local hobby store for over 30 years, and they'll provide their professional assessment and can cash you out. No collection is too big or too small, so don't drop the ball. Stop by the mall or give us a call. BNC Sports, the game starts here.
The feel of the beach is perfect, relaxing with family and friends, bonding over memorable meals fresh from the seas. It's a beach experience, and it's in our backyard at 801 Raw Bar in downtown Lynchburg. They're family-owned and family-operated, bringing you that relaxing beach house vibe while you enjoy the freshest seafood from our region, including raw oysters, king crabs, and snow crab. Not really a seafood person? Try their fresh handcrafted burgers, subs, pizza, and salads. Step into the relaxing beach house vibe at 801 Raw Bar on Church Street in downtown Lynchburg.
Head to lynchburg-hillcats.com to lock in your tickets for the Lynchburg Hillcats this season. Now here's BTR in Sports.
This is Mike Golick Sr. Don't miss Gojo and Golick coming up after the Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle right here on VTRN Sports 93.3 FM, 1320 AM, and on the VTRN Sports app.
So it's here. Liberty men's basketball, but it's already here. The women, they dominated today, first round matchup. And we mentioned this in the Fast Five at 5-ish, but the 27-point victory started by an 11-4 run at the beginning of the game against Sam Houston State. I could be off on this, but as we welcome in Richie Longshots, contributor for AseaofRed.com, and with us in the Fast Lane, we will get to the betting side of things in a moment. Don't you worry about that. First of all, for the Liberty Flames, what does it say about their programs right now that the women already made it to the semifinals of the CUSA Tournament and the men have a chance to do so this evening?
Well, I think anytime you have both your men's and women's team as the number one seed, the regular season champions in a conference, it just speaks to great coaching, a great program. And Ed, thank you so much for having me on. But a conference like Conference USA is not a slouch conference. You know, I grew up with Liberty in the Big South, and we transitioned to the ASUN, and kind of winning, being the number one seed, winning those regular season championships. That was expected. That was the expectation. And moving to a league like Conference USA, you saw a team go to the Final Four out of the Conference USA a couple of years back in the men's. So being in a conference, you look at how successful the conference has been over the years. You look at how a variety of teams that have won the conference tournament coming from different seeds. It's stacked, it's packed. And we're excited to see how Liberty can navigate through all of it.
Yeah, it's totally different. On the women's side, it looks like it's going to be the Lady Flames in Middle Tennessee, the Lady Raiders, who have clashed. And ironically, they beat each other handily, but the road team won both of those matchups. For the men, I mean, you're looking
home
at this
team
thing
won
right
both
now.
those
Home
matches.
team, yes. Excuse me. Thank you. I should have listened earlier today to the morning warm-up, wherever you listen to podcasts. But for the men, I mean, we're down to 8. UTEP beat Sam Houston. Western Kentucky knocked off Florida International. Are you buying what Richie McKay has said, which is all 8 of these teams have a legitimate chance to make noise now that we're on to the quarterfinals, which begin this evening?
Well, what coach speak is coach speak. And I do think there are a lot of teams that could win the conference tournament. I don't think there's 8, but you look at a team like Kennesaw State they might be the hottest team in the conference right now. They've beaten Liberty this year. They just beat Liberty on senior night at Liberty Arena. They have the horses that can play basketball. I was doing some research. I looked at that. There's only been one number one seed that has won the Conference USA tournament, and that was FAU that went to the Final Four. So this tournament, I think it was one last year, Western Kentucky. They were a 3 seed. There has not been many number one overall seeds to win this thing. It's interesting, the format of it. I think it doesn't reward the best teams. You see what other conferences are doing, but that's a discussion for a complete other day. But I think the format does play into the fact that any team can win, and who's going to get hot in 3 games in Huntsville, Alabama. So I don't think it's a 2-horse race. I don't think it's a 3-horse race, but I do think 4 or 5 teams can legitimately win this conference tournament. It wouldn't really shock me.
So before we delve into more teams, the value play that I had, I mean, I have Liberty winning it, when we made our projections for the morning warm-up. I did.
Yeah,
earlier.
please say your dark horse.
Well, I had two of them. One of them was Sam Houston State, and we'll get to that momentarily
Womp
because if I'm
womp.
Liberty, I'm probably glad I didn't face them. But the other is Kennesaw State that you mentioned a moment ago. I saw
Agreed.
14-1. I mean,
Great odds.
Not that I want to beat Liberty, but I mean, we're playing the odds game, right, Richie? I mean, this is what you have to do.
Exactly. And Liberty at plus 115. And I want nothing more than for Liberty to win the conference tournament, to go on to March Madness. But that's a crazy number. And I don't know what percentage wise it comes out to, but that's better than 50% chance. I think for Liberty to win, it's around 50%. That's crazy low for, like I said, a conference. It's tough. Liberty's lost some games before, but I do think they're the best team in the conference, but the best team does not always win the conference tournament. So I don't like those odds at Liberty. As a fan, I would rather just watch the game and enjoy than putting money on it. But you nailed it right on the head with Kennesaw State at 14-1. I saw that. I think if Kennesaw State can get past Liberty, they can go on to win the conference. I personally think that whoever wins the Liberty-Kennesaw State potential, I don't want to put the cubby before the buggy before the card, whatever it is. I think whoever wins that potential semifinal matchup will go on to win the conference championship. And at 14-1, you at least get yourself into a hedging opportunity if they get to the championship game with Kennesaw State.
I'm a fan of hedging. I've been burned by not over the years.
Someone may or may not have mentioned how to hedge an ACC bet with Clemson.
Well,
when making his picks.
That would have been Trey, and you can just go back to listen at the morning warm-up rather than having Trey rehash it for us right now. Just listen wherever you check out podcasts. So we won't get too far ahead of things. Richie Longshots, a CFRed.com contributor, is with us in the fast lane. But for the Flames, I had Sam Houston as the dark horse, the other dark horse, because I remember what happened against Liberty, where it looked like in that second matchup over in our favorite spot, Bel Air, yes.
Go home, the Bel Air.
That for the Flames, the value of that was that they really they encountered a challenge of Sam Houston, but it almost felt like Sam Houston had locked in on how to slow the tempo down, how to guard Liberty, particularly from the three-point range. Is Liberty drawing a better matchup against UTEP, even though they split the regular season series this year?
I think so. I think Liberty's playing with a chip on their shoulder for a variety of reasons. Not having any players be first team all conference is a wild move. Richie McKay not getting coach of the year for what he's done to turn this around. I think they're going to be able to ride that, have the chip on their shoulder mentality. But matchup wise, I think what makes this Liberty team different than some of the years in the past is that it's not just kind of reliant on one or two guys, where it was, hey, if Darius is having an off night, Kyle Rode has to step up. Or if Kyle Rode isn't in having a great night, then Darius has to step up. The team has 7 people on the team that could score 20 points in a game. And Talon Peter has been one of the best, if not the best players in the conference in the last month. And if he has an off night, you have Cade Matheny, who could score 30 in a game if he gets hot from 3. You have an inside post presence for the first time in a while, which has been great to see Coach McKay hit the portal and get that with Owen Aquino and Moff Merla, and just being able to play inside out and not just relying on playing behind the 3-point line, but getting the ball in. Zach Cleveland, obviously, but big piece of it is free throws. If you're going to be working the ball inside and they're going to take away the 3, the ball's going to be in the paint. There's going to be contact. Going to the free throw line, got to make the free throws. That's big. I think that's a matchup. As cliche it is with this Liberty team this year, make your free throws.
So here's an interesting one you mentioned about the Liberty Flames of making the free throws. It's been that, and it's been offensive rebounds by other teams. How concerning is that for you? Or do you believe the Flames, even though it's been an issue, that you've seen enough to know that they can overcome that?
Well, every team has something that they struggle with. They have a piece that you could say is their Achilles heel. But when Liberty's making shots, you don't need offensive rebounds. So I look at it that way. If you're making baskets, you're doing what you have to do. The offensive rebound piece, it's a bonus, and you obviously have to do it in some capacity, but have to weather the storm if that's what it is, getting on the glass. And it's tough because long shots, long rebounds, 3-pointers, longer rebounds. So that's where Liberty has some smaller guards. So that ball coming off the rim off a 3-point shot, who's going to be, getting to that ball first?
We love the long shots, long rebounds phrase.
I didn't plan that, but when it came out, I went, that's good.
You know, we're all for puns and plays on words here in the fast lane. So we welcome it when Richie Longshots from AseaofRed.com gifts us with those cheesy, cliche-filled opportunities.
Yeah.
So for the Flames, though, you mentioned that the big concern being offensive rebounds and free throws. The flip side of that, and we'll get to some bigger picture topics to wrap up our chat in a moment, but what gives you the greatest strength of how the Liberty Flames can overcome those challenges and be able to perform well in a close game in spite of offensive rebounds and free throws at times being an issue?
I think it's depth. As I mentioned before, you have players where Coach McKay is going to know who's hot, who's going to have to have the ball in their hands, that who's locked in the night of that game. I look back at McKay's ability to identify that and ride the horses that are ready to run. Look at that Mississippi State game where Scotty James not playing his best ball. And he was one of the best players on the team. But McKay knew, hey, wasn't his night. Had the guys in there that were ready to compete, that were feeling themselves that night. So I think McKay's coaching ability mixed with the depth of this team allows him to really pick and choose to have the best players on the court for that situation, whatever teams throw at them.
Now, bigger picture parts, and this does tie into tonight and the rest of the Conference USA tournament for the Liberty Flames. What motivation do you believe there is silently? So maybe this being a blessing in disguise that Richie McKay was not coach of the year. Talon Peter was not player of the year. Heck, for a team that did as well as they did, nobody made all conference first team. Is that a silent motivator to maybe give the Flames, pun intended, of course, an extra spark?
I think 100%. It seems like these guys are a team. I've seen them out on campus at football games. They genuinely they're a team. It's not just, a couple guys and the rest of the team. They are a team. And yeah, if you ask any of them, would you rather have a conference tournament championship, or have two players be first team all conference? They'd go conference championship and a trip to March Madness. If you ask Coach McKay, would you rather coach of the year or to hear your name on Selection Sunday? He's going to go with Selection Sunday. So I think that that's going to be like this. They're going to be locked in. We've seen that this team can beat anyone in the conference when they play their best game. They can beat anyone in the conference, and I'm feeling good. There's always going to be those nerves. We've seen Liberty teams that shouldn't have won the conference tournament. Win the conference tournament. It was my senior year in 2013, and I think they had 20 losses. Got hot, went to the tournament. We've seen Liberty teams that were the number one seed, the best team in the conference, split up. So that's college basketball. It adds those extra nerves to it. Where there's the number one seed, and that's all fine and good, but you still got to win 3 games in Huntsville to go to the dance.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate thing for the Liberty Flames. It's that balance of having a little extra oomph, but not letting it consume you this time of year.
Yes, and then not let all the things we mentioned earlier, the lack of accolades, kind of get in everyone's head and become the main focal point. But it's one of those things that's better left unsaid, of just, hey, we know what we have to do. We know what we need to show them.
Richie Longshots, we know what we need, which is his insight and perspective at Richie Longshots on Twitter, and generous enough to get some of it today in the fast lane from AseaofRed.com. Richie, thanks for your time. We always love catching up with you. Enjoy the action, and we will speak soon.
Thank you, Ed. Have a great night.
You too. Richie Longshots with us here in the fast lane. Just a fun way to look at it. And yes, he's got that betting angle of Kennesaw State. So glad he's on board with my other dark horse pick since the first one. Well, Sam Houston State didn't come close.
I roasted you this morning fairly.
I definitely heard it. And if the listeners want to get a laugh in at my expense, just download the morning warm-up.
Hey, all I say is I'm just, if you want to go back and listen to my ACC picks, I find I'm 1 for 6.
There it is. 1 for 6, Trey. In baseball, that might be moderately acceptable, but not really. In betting, it's going to get you to the outhouse quickly. Meanwhile, we're going down to Charlotte. The man who's been in the penthouse, the ACC tournament, our own on-site reporter, TJ Wilkerson, with the latest on the sentiment around Ron Sanchez at Virginia, amid the news, of course, today that Virginia will not retain him as their men's basketball coach. That still to come. This is the Fast Lane on the VTRN Sports app, and ask that smart speaker, open VTRN Sports.
When you're voted one of the best plumbers according to Lynchburg Living magazine, you want to hire the best. Sullivan Plumbing wants the best plumbers to join our award-winning team. Do you have a clean driving record? Do you have at least 4 years plumbing experience? Then you're a 5-star recruit, and Sullivan Plumbing would love to meet with you. Take the first step. Call Sullivan Plumbing in downtown Lynchburg or email sullivanplumbing@gmail.com.
When the thrill of playing ball turns into the agony of a broken windshield or car window, contact Apple Auto Glass. Your local auto glass repair shop on Allegheny Avenue in Lynchburg, Apple Auto Glass provide a professional assessment with the honesty from your neighbors, so you can get back to sharing the great moments this season.
Are you a property owner looking to maximize your investment? Tired of the day-to-day hassles of managing your rental properties? Welcome to Brownstone Properties, where we take the stress out of property management. From tenant screening to maintenance and everything in between, we'll ensure your property shines.
Hello there.
Visit brownstoneproperties.com and come by our office, 3720 Old Forest Road in Lynchburg.
Hey gang, this is Bud Foster, former defensive coordinator for the Virginia Tech Hokies. You're listening to The Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle. Join the chat at Trey Lyle BT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
I play baseball. I love sports media.
Sorry,
Yes!
I was fixing the phone issue, so two things at once.
You know, we were fixing the phone issue. Everybody's got their stressors, Trey. I mean, this is a convenient way for us to remind you.
But shout out to Jim Rome.
Well, I mean, look, Jim Rome was on for a second. I'm sure you don't really miss him when you get to hear our beautiful voices. So that's what we've got.
Otherwise, you'd be on X, because that's where he's at, too.
You know, speaking of X, because that guy happens to be in the White House, and stressors that everyone has. You know what? We've come up with a solution.
I turned both. I was trying
mine off and yours.
I was trying to turn mine off.
That guy that runs X.
We don't shut down when NFL free agency starts.
Yes, we do not. We were still on the air and providing insight throughout the entire free agency Monday, the morning we're up in the fast lane. So anyway, everybody's got their stressors. Well, guess what? Whether you're pro-tariff or anti-tariff, it doesn't matter at InsaneRadioDeals.com. All you've got to do now through the end of the month is enter the promo code TARIFF at checkout after you list all your items in the cart and get 25% off the purchase of any item at InsaneRadioDeals.com. That includes the OG items like the Lynchburg Hillcats general admission and reserve seating tickets with that $10 food voucher. It includes other great OG items like a SeaofRed.com club membership, so you can get more great insight like we just got from our friend Richie Longshots of a SeaofRed.com earlier in the fast lane, or new things like Ballad Brewing in Danville, Three Roads Brewing in Lynchburg, The Yard on 5th Street, downtown Cairo. Might be on the dinner docket this evening. Got to consult with the family, but it is delicious, and they have large portions, by the way, at downtown Cairo. All 25% off the already low price at InsaneRadioDeals.com. So you enter the promo code TARIFF at checkout, and you're going backwards on the prices. Not up, but down even more than they already are because, you know, why not? We're here to be good for something. By the way, we got a comment that has come in before we get to TJ. Ben chimes in. I'm outing the guy. Thomas is actually his real name, so I've got to give him that. But Thomas chimes in, hey, your Insane Radio Deals promo is so good, it's making me root for higher tariffs. 25%, let's take it to 55% tariffs so that we can add even more off. You know what? Don't wish for it, Ben, because we might actually have more tariffs coming your way. If you have more tariffs, we might have to discount it even more at InsaneRadioDeals.com. And it's already special. And there's a reason, by the way, why it's going to the end of the month, because you know what April is. 420 hours until that special day, and our great special, it was so well received last year, may be coming back in some variation. Meanwhile, our boots on the ground reporter, who was there for the loss to Georgia Tech today and there for Virginia Tech's loss yesterday, TJ Wilkerson, with us in the fast lane. TJ, a pleasure to be speaking with you. Hope you're well. Thank you for making some time for us down in Charlotte from the ACC tournament. First of all, you had an interesting Q&A exchange with Ron Sanchez, and you've put some of that information already out at TJ_Wilkerson8 on Twitter and Instagram. What did you learn about maybe not the direction of Ron Sanchez, because a lot of people thought he wasn't going to come back, but it clearly seems like people admired the job he did, given that he had his old young Jeezy on, playing a very difficult hand this year.
Yeah, no, Ron has a lot of respect from the fans, from players. I mean, McNeely today, who went off in the game for 27, said himself, I mean, he admires Ron. Everyone looks to Ron for guidance, for everything pretty much. So Ron was definitely a staple, and it's kind of sad to see that they're not going to retain him as a coach, because clearly players respected him, and clearly he had something brewing there. He was just given a bad card, so to say.
Yeah, it was just difficult for Ron Sanchez. He made the best decision he could, but how much also did you get the sentiment, even watching Virginia, that this is a team that fought hard? It's just the roster construction was not great, and it appears like they're going to need a reset.
They definitely needed a reset. I mean, they practically got bullied in the paint today. They were out-rebounded by at least 13 rebounds, especially on the offensive boards. I mean, it was hard to watch. So UVA definitely needs to work on the big situation as well, but clearly going to have to go in, work on some NIL deals, do some heavy recruiting, start over from there.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of hitting the reset button at Virginia, and you would expect that. Meanwhile, for Virginia Tech, how disappointing is it that their loss to Cal? It's not because of the officials, but it seems to have fallen into a trend where now we've had 3 games in the ACC tournament already that the officials have had some kind of an impact.
It's definitely interesting. I mean, even before the Virginia Tech game, I mean, Pittsburgh and Notre Dame, the ending to that game, I mean, everyone just was in shell shock by the final call. A lot of people will tell you, yeah, it was a good call. Zach Austin did have his hand on Tay, but other people will tell you they just didn't see the contact. And Cable even said it himself. 25 years in his coaching career, he has never had a game end like that. But, I mean, even the refs were everywhere on Virginia Tech and California, it felt like. I felt like there were so many missed calls, moments where VT would be in the paint, and there was just a lot of fouling going on in the paint that just weren't called. And even today, I felt like earlier in the early game between Georgia Tech and UVA, there were several missed calls. So the officiating's been lackluster, to say the least, but Virginia Tech's performance, I mean, I think what it came down to was at the end, they just lost steam. I mean, as Mike Young said, he's proud of the young guys. I mean, they fought hard, but it's hard when, like Virginia Tech got out-rebounded by California.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately what has happened through much of the tournament. TJ, thank you for your time today in the Fast Lane. We appreciate you popping on short notice to join us here from the ACC tournament. Enjoy the rest of the action down in Charlotte. Keep up the great work at TJ_Wilkerson8 on Twitter and Instagram, and look forward to chatting again.
Thank you so much for having me, Ed.
Indeed. TJ Wilkerson, our boots on the ground down in Charlotte. Give him a follow.
I think updates. The ACC shared the Leonard Hamilton quote. He asked him about coaching. So shout out to TJ.
Yes, he did. TJ doing great work, and we're glad to have him for us down there in Charlotte. In the meantime, we're glad to have you listen to College Hoops, 6:45 airtime tonight for the Patriot League Championship, one of 2 games. Then tomorrow, we're sandwiched in between the Big Ten tournament action.
Hopefully, unless there's like 20 overtimes.
Yeah, we'll find out about that tomorrow, 5 to 6. Thanks for listening to The Fast Lane on VTRN Sports, 93.3 FM, W227 BG Timberlake, and 1320 AM, WVGM Lynchburg.
Network.